hubo locos? What's up, my locos? Thanks for tuning in. This is OG Loco live. So today we're gonna talk about OG Scarface. OG Scarface, a pure OG Loco Old Family Red American Pit Bull Terrier. We're gonna feature him today. And I'm going to get into the genetics of what a pure or what constitutes a pure OG Loco Old Family Red, why they are different than other Old Family Red families out there today, and why they're unique within the American Pit Bull Terrier breed. So I really want to clarify that. I want to get into the genetics, the selection process of my dogs, and how they're different and why they're different, and they're working at a very high level, and why I feel they're uh, the best working family of Old Family Reds in the world today. We'll get into that, and that's not to knock any other Old Family Red programs. They're doing their own thing. I'm in my own lane, so I'm only going to talk about mine. But I am familiar uh, with most of the breeders that have been breeding Old Family Reds for a while now. I'm familiar with their programs. Um, I'm familiar with their family of dogs. So we're all a pretty close community. We all know of each other if we don't know each other. So it's, you don't have to direct me to someone else. I'm probably already familiar with that person. And if you're not sure, ask them if they know who me or know my dogs or aware of my program. Most will probably, if they have been dealing with Old Family Reds for a while, they'll probably tell you yes, they are familiar with OG Loco Old Family Reds. So having said that, we're going to get into a few things today. We got about an hour. We'll talk about philosophy, which I always like to share with people, a little philosophy, how to be an OG. We're going to talk about OG Scarface and his genetics, and then we're going to talk about the pure OG Local Old Family Reds. So give a few minutes for people to load up, get on here. But let's see. The butter knife. If you're an OG, you know what um, what the butter knife represents. So I use it for spreading butter, peanut butter on my bread. But the butter knife has significance in the OG world. So I'll talk a little bit of history. Um, some cultures, Native American cultures, and the Aztecs, which the Aztec culture, which I'm a descendant of, used to skin uh, their sacrifices or their captures or their enemies with a dull knife. So that's where the dull knife comes into play. They would peel the skin of any human sacrifices or any enemies they caught as part of the sacrifice. And part of the religious ceremony was shedding the skin and wearing the skin was new life. So that was their beliefs. So I think that's where the dull knife syndrome or the dull knife skinning or peeling skin with a dull knife was first brought up in culture and history. Um, in modern terms, the dull knife was used by uh, certain gangsters, and it was something that was held out there that to peel the skin of an animal or your prey with a dull knife was viewed as very hard to do, took a lot of strength, took a lot of courage to peel it with the dull knife. Now, I I hunt, so I don't skin animals with the dull knife. You'll be there forever. But that I just wanted to bring up that a lot of people don't understand that the importance of a dull knife or the butter knife, of what role that plays in pop culture history. And then I guess I'll share this. I was going to share it in another live, but I'll share this. So it has to do with my sewer name. For those of you who don't know, I like to share a little bit about myself because I believe the breeding program is not just the genetics and the dogs. You have to believe in the breeder, know a little bit about the breeder and what his values were and what their standards were. And those are the selection, that breeder selection, and the type of dogs that they select for the breeding program, and how they move forward with those dogs and they pick them. So you have to really know the breeder and what the breeder standards are and their values and the type of dogs and where they came from. So having said that, I like to always share a little bit about myself, my upbringing, which helped shape me on how I have developed the OG Loco Old Family Red program. So I did some history because I'm a big genetics freak. I always research genetics and educate myself and as a breeder, but not just dog genetics, but all species and humans. But one of the things I did a few years back was I researched my surname. It's like, well, where did it originate from? Where did it come from? And my surname actually comes from a town in Spain, Guevara. So I researched it, and there is a castle in northern Spain in the Basque region on the French border, and it's the castle of Guevara, and there's a town of Guevara. So what the history says is that there was a Spanish soldier in like the 1500s that was sent to Baja California and settled there, and that's how the surname came from Europe or Spain and landed in Baja California and spread from there. That's what I got from my research on my surname. And there is a family crest, so I do have the Guevara shield tattooed on my chest here, which there is a family crest. So one day, I have been to Spain before. I have been to Europe when I was a kid, but I didn't know the history of my surname when I went to Spain. But one day I want to go back to Spain and show them my family crest. It's like, where is my inheritance, man? I said, I'm a Guevara, man. It was like, I want a piece of my castle, piece of my land. And because this tattoo don't come off unless you're ready to peel it off with a butter knife. Oh, shit. So anyway, that's the way all my tattoos, they don't come off, man. You got to peel them off. So anyway, that was what I did on my surname, and that's it does come. There is a castle de Guevara, but so I always relate back is, wow, that's like The Godfather, man. Because in the movie The Godfather, Vito, when he came to America, somehow when he was at Ellis Island, it said, well, what is your name? And he says, Vito, from the town of Corleone. So that's how he got his last name, Vito Corleone, from the town of Corleone in Sicily. And then I was like, well, that's how my surname ended up. I'm sure there was like someone landed in, one of the soldiers or whoever he was from the town or province of Guevara in Spain. When he landed over in the New World, they said, what is your name? He goes, I'm so-and-so from the town of Guevara in Spain. And that's how the Guevara surname started. So I was like, oh, wow. So little similarities. I think that's the way surnames developed back in the day. Was a lot of it was where your family was from that town, and they kept that name, and that became last names, surnames. So just a little bit of history. I just wanted to share that. I do have a castle. Um, if I go back, you can come visit me at my castle. Crazy shit. So we'll get a little started on OG Scarface, and I'll pull him up here. He's a big dog, so I don't know how long I could keep him up here settled down. But I think you all know my history, and before I get into it, let me do my disclaimer. I do not breed, sell, or what's the other term? Or ship dogs for any illegal purposes. I don't fight dogs. I don't engage in organized dog fighting. That is not my role. That's not my purpose. I don't engage in it. So don't take anything I say out of context because that's not what I'm speaking about. But I am a historian of the breed. I know where the breed came from. Dog fighting was legal in the United States till 1976. These dogs that were bred for that and under legal means, and they got outlawed. So as breeders and owners of these dogs, is how do you take these dogs that have been outlawed for dog fighting, and what can you use them for in today's times that's legal? How do we keep those traits they were bred for working at the highest level and apply them in a legal manner? And that's really where I'm coming from with the OG Loco Old Family Red program, is keeping these dogs game, keeping their high prey drive, keeping what they were bred for, those traits, and preserving them, but applying those traits in a legal fashion in today's times. And hunting is the best way for me to do that. So I do hunt my dogs, and I breed for hunting traits and prey drive and all those things that the dog was bred for, and I apply them and I use them in a legal manner in today's time. So I just want to make that clear. So that's what my dogs are about. That's what my program is about. If you are looking for fighting dogs, I'm probably not the guy you want to come to. My dogs are too expensive. They're more for someone who wants old blood, rare blood, working blood, hunting dogs. Dogs you could acquire to start your own breeding program, because they're going to be very the genetics are going to be there for your own breeding program, and you can breed your own direction. They're not going to be $200-300 free dogs that you can go fight and match, and if they die, they die. It doesn't matter. I don't breed for those types of dogs. I breed a high caliber dog. I breed for working traits and has value. So I try to tell people is if you're looking for a cheap fighting dog to conduct illegal activities with, then I'm not the guy you want to come to. You could go to the pound. Not to say you should, but you could go to the pound and get a pound dog if that's what you want to do. Don't come to a breeder who breeds high caliber dogs. So just having said that, I just wanted to clarify that, because there's people that always try to misconstrue what I say. But I do not breed or engage in any illegal activities or illegal dog fighting. So I said that. That's my precursor. So we're going to get into the discussion, a little history about these dogs and what they were bred for, which includes dog fighting. So that's just from a historical standpoint. It's part of the educational process. You have to understand these dogs' genetics traits and how to deal with them, because that's what they were bred for. And so you have to understand that, and they do require management. They do require, you have to work them. You got to keep them busy, and you have to be a responsible owner. So we'll get into that a little bit. So let me precurse OG Scarface and talk about how today he is representative of the pure OG Loco Old Family Reds. Okay, and what constitutes a pure OG Loco Old Family Red? What makes it different than any other breed? So I'm gonna take a step back, and then we'll bring it to my program. You have the breed of American Pit Bull Terrier. Okay, that was established in the late 1800s, early 1900s through UKC and ADBA. Okay, and that breed, in order to get papers, had to you had to match your dog. You had to fight it because it was a fighting registry. They were. So in order for, your dog had to be in a match to get papers as an American Pit Bull Terrier. And I think UKC did that till like the 1930s, and then they got out of the dog fighting. But ADBA did it, I think, up until '76. And that's why you'll see a lot of pit bull papers that say unknown, but they got papers. Because if you have a registered pit bull that has unknown on its paperwork, that means that dog was fought and matched, and the only way he got papers is because he won a match. So they gave him papers, but they didn't know how he was bred, so they put on the papers sire and dam unknown, and that's how you start your breeding program. But in order for that dog to get papers, they had to win a match. Um, and that's just the truth. I mean, that's just how the breed was developed. So prior to the American Pit Bull Terrier breed being established, there were fighting dogs already. There were fighting dogs in England, Ireland, Europe, Spain, Scotland, different countries. Have been doing it for hundreds of years. You know the history between the bull and the terrier, how they started mixing them and they produced, catch dogs and farm dogs, and some of the dogs went on to be fighting dogs or ratting dogs, then fighting dogs. So that's the history of the bull terrier crosses that created the fighting dog that we have today. In those countries, they were known as different names. Okay, so you had Staffordshire Terriers, and you had Old Family Reds, and they went by different names because they weren't American Pit Bull Terriers yet, because the breed hadn't been formalized in America yet. But what the early breeders were doing, they were taking fighting dogs from the different countries, and they were mixing them, breeding them, crossing them with their fighting dogs, and produced the purebred American Pit Bull Terrier that we have today. One of the families that came from Ireland that was the precursor to developing the American Pit Bull Terrier was the Old Family Reds from Ireland. Okay, they came to America with the Irish immigrants, and they were known as being small, gamey, deep game dogs. And they were bred on Ireland for, who knows, hundreds of years. So because they were bred on the island, and they were really family bred, type bred, inbred for generations, they started showing the recessive traits. And these dogs, when they were coming into America from Ireland, were starting to show red coats, red nose, red eyes. Red nose, red lips, red toenails, and gold eyes. That's how the term Old Family Reds started. That's how you identified an Irish fighting dog. It had those physical phenotypical traits. And they were very known for being deep game dogs. And the reason they were blended in was at the time of the development of the American Pit Bull Terrier, they were seeking deep gameness. The breeders, they had good fighting dogs, but they wanted to add more gameness to a dog that wouldn't quit when fighting, a dog that would die, scratch dying, and trying to breed those traits into their fighting dogs here in America was what they were trying to do, and they achieved that. And one of the ways they did it was they were blending in these Irish dogs and these English dogs and capturing the gameness, which more or less comes from the terrier blood. So they say the white terrier, the extinct white terrier, was a very game dog over in England, which went to Ireland, and so it's that terrier blood that gives the gameness in these pit bulls. And when they crossed it with the bulldog gave it the ruggedness, the mouth, the bone, all this other things. So they blended it together. So now you had a bulldog that wouldn't quit. That's the pit bull terrier. So that's the development of the breed. That's how it got started. So then the Old Family Reds were then, you had Bill Leitner, who was an Irishman, and some of these early breeders were immigrants from other countries. or they were like first or second generation immigrants. Um, so yeah, they really focus on the where their family was from. So if they were Irish, they looked at the Irish dogs or blood. If they were English, they looked at the English blood, whatever country they came from, and they used. That's how the term "old family" came into play. An old family was because the United States was still a new country at the time, it was only about 100 years old, and it was mostly immigrants at that time that were still coming to the country. You had new family here in the United States, which was a new country. And then you had your old family, which was the country you came from, that you immigrated from. So these dogs were known then as old family from the old world, from where the breeders' old families came from. So that's how the term old family came from. The reds were applied to Irish because those dogs were starting to show their traits. And that's how old family red came into play. So Leitner started line breeding these dogs, and he created the Leitner Old Family. Well, he didn't even call them Old Family Reds, to be honest with you. He just called them, they were just known as Leitner dogs. And they were very well respected, well known pit bulls, the fighting dogs, and they won a lot of matches. So the Leitner blood, and he had two strains. He had the red noses, which were off the Irish Old Family Red blood. And then he got out of those dogs because they were running too big. And then he developed a second line of pit bulls that were smaller, dark, black dogs. So those black dogs, he created a second line of Old Family, of Leitner dogs. Okay, two different lines, same breed. So I really got to look at the Leitner dogs. Which ones are you talking about? Are you talking about Leitner's red dogs, or are you talking about Leitner's black dogs? Two different strains. So when Leitner got out of the red dogs because they were running too big, he moved to Colorado, and he started a new line of black dogs that were much smaller, and he created that second line in Colorado. I believe he lived in Louisiana at the time. So some of the old Leitner dogs were still left in Louisiana, and the story goes that Bob Hempfield and Dan McCoy were looking for some of the best Leitner dogs to start their breeding program, and they went down there and they found some of the pure Leitner dogs that they were able to validate and started their breeding program. And that became the Hempfield McCoy family of dogs. And it was Dan McCoy who coined the term that these are Old Family red-nosed dogs. So to honor the Irish blood that came from Ireland, the Old Family Reds, he started calling his family of dogs, which were the Hempfield McCoy, because he was partnering with Bob Hempfield, as Old Family Red Nose. And those were the advertisements. And I think in the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Bob Hempfield died in the 60s. So like 30s, 40s, and 50s, there was a lot of advertisements of the Old Family Red Nose, which were basically American Pit Bull Terriers, but of the Hempfield McCoy strain. And they looked like the old Leitner dogs. They were red nose with the gold eyes and red toenails. And most of them were line bred off of, I think they considered a true Old Family red-nosed dog for the Hempfield McCoy line of dogs had to trace back to Leitner's Vic. They had to be line bred off Leitner's Vic. But a lot of those dogs, were related to each other through Ferguson Centipede, which was the champion. He was related to a lot of the Leitner Vic dogs, and so they started crossing those Leitner Vic dogs, and that created the Hempfield McCoy Old Family Red-Nosed dog. So when I talk about Old Family Red-Nosed, the Hempfield strain, that's what we're talking about, are the Leitner dogs that were line bred off of Leitner's Vic, okay, and that's the history, which go back to the Irish Old Family Red-Nosed dogs. And those dogs, in their heyday, Bob Hempfield identified them or advertised them as the gamest ever bred, that they would scratch to their death and they would take their death. They wouldn't cur out. They just keep scratching. And that's what they got to be known for, and that's how the legend of the Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs took hold, and in the pit bull community. And they were easy to identify at the time because uh, most of the pit bulls at that time did not look like the Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs. They were mostly white dogs, white patch dogs, brindle dogs. So you had these red noses and gold eyes that were showing up, and it was easy to identify that that was an Old Family Red-Nosed Dog. And it's not their color; they were winning, and because they were winning, people started breeding them and line breeding off them, and that's the only reason why they were renowned as great pit bulls in history, because they were very deep game dogs. So over after Hemphill died, and then you had these new breeders that this is when dogfighting started. About the time dogfighting became illegal in America around the 70s, mid 70s. A lot of breeders got into the dogs and were no longer matching dogs as was illegal, but they were trying to keep remnants of the old fighting dogs. They're trying to keep them, preserve them as, look, I have the last of the Hemphill blood, last of the game Hemphill blood. And they started breeding them. But it was easy to breed those dogs because you could breed them on a phenotype level. If you breed two red noses with gold eyes, red lips, and red toenails, they're going to produce that. So you started getting these line of Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs that look like look like the Hemphill Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs, the match dogs, the game dogs, but did not act or work like them. They weren't game. And a lot of that was people were just breeding them for their looks and pedigree. They were trying to stack the Hemphill name in their dogs, say, look, I have a pure Hemphill dog. And then they were trying to stack the color. You know, it's red nose with gold eyes, red toenails. But those dogs were not tested. They were not worked. They were just breeding them. So at a point in time, the percentage of the Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs, gameness started declining because they were not testing them, and they were not selecting the game ones for their breeding program, and that's what happened. And that can happen in any strain of dogs. When you stop working or testing your dogs and you're just breeding dogs, you're gonna just breed dogs that are dogs, and you're not breeding dogs to a working standard, to a specific standard, to keep that gameness. And that's what happened to the Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs. And then a lot of them went into show homes, and people were breeding them for just show. So, I mean, they were pretty dogs, and they did good in the show ring, and they made great family pets because they were pretty, but they were no longer representative of the Lightner and the Hemphill Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs that were pit dogs, that were match dogs, that were fighting dogs. They were just shells of those dogs. They looked like them, but they didn't perform or act like them. And as the blood got older and more watered down and more diluted, and the percentages of those dogs, of game dogs coming out of that line declined. The other thing that happened for the people that were breeding fighting dogs, they did value the Hemphill blood, and they did value the Lightner blood, but they didn't breed it pure. So they started crossing it into their blood, and a lot of the crosses were with the Daibo bred dogs. So they started, and the Klaus dogs. So they started blending the old Hemphill Lightner dogs into the Klaus blood and blending it into the Daibo dogs. And after a period of time, they became a different strain, or they were absorbed. Okay, so they were no longer considered pure Hemphill or pure Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs because they were crossed on the Klaus stuff or the Daibo stuff, and they were those bloodlines absorbed them. And so that's where, even though they existed genetically in the dogs, you didn't see the Hemphill name anymore. You didn't see the Lightner name anymore, and they weren't referred to as Old Family Red-Nosed Dogs. And that's what spurred the development of a lot of the strains we have today. If you go back into the modern day pit bull strains, the working lines, they're going to have Old Family Red Nose somewhere in their pedigree because that's what happened. Is they crossed those Old Family Red Nose dogs and created dogs like Jocko, Red Boy, Tombstone Bolio. All those dogs, those family of dogs, have Old Family Red Nose in their genetics somewhere in there because that's how those strains were started. So they didn't really disappear, they were absorbed, and those that were trying to breed them pure just weren't to the caliber of what a working pit bull was or is. They were just shells of themselves, and that's what hurt the strain. So there was a few breeders that were trying to keep, or they did, they were keeping them game, but there wasn't a lot of breeders. So what happened is the population of the Old Family Red Nose, the Hempfield dogs, of those that were working and breeding and keeping them game at the high level like Hempfield did and Leitner did, that population of Old Family Red Nose dogs got smaller and smaller. There was very few breeders that had game working Old Family Red Nose dogs. And that's what happened. So if you wanted to keep, if you wanted a game working Old Family Red Nose dogs, they were hard to find. You were going to have to do your research. You would have to know that breeder standard and what they were breeding for and if they were working them or not. And be honest with you, most of them weren't available to the public. You couldn't buy one. It was because they were so highly regarded as the last of the Hempfield blood that was still working, that a lot of that blood wasn't shared with the public and you couldn't get it, and unless you knew somebody, then you were able to get it. And that's what happened. So they controlled the population of the pure Old Family Red Nose blood that was working, that was game, and it wasn't available to the public. So that sort of hurt it too. So when you're looking, when I got into it, I always liked a working dog. I like a game dog. I always have. It was something that I had read all the books on them. I knew who had them. And then as I got deeper and deeper into breeding, then I started looking for those families of Old Family Red Nose dogs that you knew that they were keeping them at a high working level and try to acquire some and start my own breeding program. And that's what how the OG Loco family of dogs got started. So I have to go back to my first dogs in 1990, which was OG's 44 Magnum. And all my dogs today are all line bred off 44 Magnums, so over 35 years off 44 Magnum. And he was basically a Hempfield, he had Hempfield, Old Family Red, heavy on the Geronimo Red Dixie stuff. And then he had some Sorona in him, which was Hempfield Klaus crosses. And then he had a little bit of Colby Heinzel in him. So he wasn't a pure Hempfield Old Family Red Nose dog, but he had high percentage of pure Hempfield blood in him. And that's who I started with. And he was a game dog, very game dog. So as I bred my own, I started breeding my own breeding program, and I started, I like game working dogs. That's what I like. That's what I bred for, and I used to hunt. I hunted with them. I wanted a dog that, was representative of the American Pit Bull Terrier breed that was still game, that would work, but also carried high percentages of the old Hempfield, Leitner, Old Family Red Nose blood in their genetics. And that's what I was striving for. That's how I started my program. So in the early days, I did a lot of inbreeding. I was breeding father-daughter, really inbreeding, and I was culling a lot. I was getting a lot of genetic problems. And anytime you're doing inbreeding. You're doubling up on the good and you're doubling up on the bad genes. So you're going to get some dogs that are really good because they got all the good traits because you doubled up on them. But you're also going to get some dogs that have doubled up on the recessive bad traits that your dog carries. All dogs carry bad traits in them, but they don't show up until you do an inbreeding or a heavy line breeding. So what you're doing is you're doubling up on those bad genes, and the pups are going to show those bad genes. And that could be anything from deformities, underbites, overbites, curl tails, temperament issues, overly aggressive dogs, overly shy dogs, dogs that don't produce because they don't have good uh, sperm counts, things like that. All that's the product of heavily inbreeding or heavily line breeding a family of dogs. And what you're supposed to do is you're supposed to cull those out of your breeding program, because you take the dog, you take the pups that were doubled up on the good genes. So you've taken, it's like wringing a towel. You squeezed out the bad genes. Now you have a product of a really pure line now that's all the good genes of your dogs, and you keep repeating that. You sort of wring the towel, get rid of the bad genes, and you only breed off the good stuff. So over generations, what you're doing now is, if you're doing selective breeding and you have a standard and there's certain traits that you're breeding for, they're working their game, they want to hunt high prey drive. As you select the dogs that you move forward in your program, you start line breeding off them. Now you're concentrating on those dogs, and those dogs in your program have the biggest influence in your pups. And now those traits they were known for are highly concentrated, and they're passing those traits on to your pups. So that's how line breeding works. That's how family breeding works. You're working within a family of dogs that are all related. You're picking the best dogs in that family that have the type of traits that you're looking for, and you're calling out the ones that don't meet your program, and you're focusing on the ones that do meet your program that you move forward with. And you repeat that every generation. If you're doing it correctly, your dogs are getting better every generation. You're getting better dogs on the traits you're looking for, because now those genes are highly concentrated in your dogs off of known dogs that you worked, you tested, you selected, their strengths, you know what they're about, and you made the right crosses with them to make them better. And that's how family breeding works, and that's how line breeding works. So, we'll fast forward my story. I did that, and then about 2009, I was going to get out of them. I was down to just OG bull, sort of like what Leitner did, but I didn't do it exactly like Leitner did. I was just going to get out of the dogs. I was going to let OG bull die out. He was my last dog, and I was just going to get out of the pit bulls. And I think I took a couple years off, and then I just said, you know what? I had already been breeding these dogs like almost 20 years, and if Bull is the last remnant of my blood, when he dies, it all dies. There's nothing left. And Bull was, a great representative of the OG Loco Old Family Red blood. Okay, so my thinking was how do I use Bull to develop a new strain of dogs? Heavy on the Hempfield Leitner blood. So I went out, I looked for one of the purest Hempfield dogs I could find, and I found Allison's No Bones About It. And Allison's No Bones About It was probably one of the purest Hempfield Old Family Red-Nosed dogs at that time. She was like 30 times Hempfield Geronimo in her pedigree, and Hempfield Red Dixie. Really high percentage of Hempfield Geronimo and Red Dixie on her paperwork in her gene pool. And I hadn't seen that in a dog since 44 Magnum, because 44 Magnum was heavy Hempfield Geronimo Red Dixie on his pedigree, but that was back in 1990. So here we are in 2010, 2011, and it was hard to find dogs that were high percentage of the pure Hempfield blood in them still. because Hemphill had died in like '67. So to find it was hard, and when I did find it, I started breeding to OG Bull, and that started my new strain of what I call the OG Loco Old Family Reds, and that's what I named them, similar to what Dan McCoy did, where Dan McCoy started calling his family of dogs Old Family Red Nose. I started my family of dogs within the Old Family Red Nose family or umbrella, but my dogs that I was using and I was line breeding off of were different. They were unique. Uh, so I named them OG Loco Old Family Reds, and they became their own family. By selective breeding, by culling and testing and picking the best representatives, I developed a pure strain of OG Loco Old Family Reds that genetically now are pure, and they're heavily line bred off of the old Hemphill Old Wilder blood today. And not only do they look like them, not only do they look like the Hemphill and Leitner dogs and the Old Family Reds, they're the dark copper red, dark red nose, red lips, gold eyes, dark red toenails, which those dogs are known for. They work like those dogs used to. They're very game, they're very aggressive, the high prey drive. And I have to tell people, granted, OG Bull was like that, but Bones wasn't. Even though she was pure on the Old Family Red breeding and Bull, she was nowhere near the bulldog that Bull was. But genetically, I believe the genes were there, and it was going to take 2 or 3 generations of breeding Bull to Bones and picking the best pups off them and culling and testing, and then moving forward to develop my pure strain. So what we have today, so what happened out of that breeding, out of Bull and Bones, I picked the 3 best dogs that I felt came off. They were game working dogs. That they were bulldogs, and that was OG Kratos, his brother OG Ruger, and their 3/4 brother OG Jew. So OG Jew's mom was a litter mate to Kratos and Ruger, and she was bred back to her sire OG Bull to produce OG Jew. So those 3 brothers is what I started line breeding off of to create my pure OG Loco Old Family Reds today. And what I've done, once I nailed down the 3 males I wanted to be foundation sires, I started crossing their daughters with each other. And I started blending the blood together. To now I have established a pure genetic blood of OG Local Family Reds that are pure, that are the blend of 3 brothers, OG Kratos, OG Ruger, OG Jew, who are all off of OG Bull and Allison's No Bounds About It. Okay, so they all go back to it. So all of my dogs, all my pure dogs, go back to those 3 males. And that's what OG Scarface is, and I'll bring him on in a second. So I was able to now say, after 3-4 generations, that I am now producing a pure OG Local Old Family Red that's a blend of the 3 brothers, line bred off those dogs and blended together with those genes that were all tested to the highest standard. They're all game, they're all prey drive, that represent a pure OG Local Old Family Red in Scarface that I have here, and then a gingerbread and a few other ones that I have. They're all a blend of those 3 brothers. So that's OG Local stamp of approval, that if you have an OG Local dog, or if someone says they have an OG Local dog, it has to have the 3 brothers in the pedigree, and you have to see the pattern and how those dogs were bred of breeding their daughters to each other to produce an OG Local dog. Now, I have bred a lot of dogs over the years, like litter mates to Jew and Kratos and Ruger, and their pups that didn't make the cut. They were not using my program. They were culled, or they just were family dogs. They didn't make the cut because they weren't the standard of what I was looking for as a breeder. So people might have bred off those dogs. I don't know, but they're not in my dog. They're not in my breeding program, so I don't recognize those dogs as part of the OG Loco Old Family Red breeding program. They're not the dogs I use to move forward with. And so I think that's a key point when you look at the breeding is, did you get it from OG Loco? Is it off the dogs that he's using and breeding? Or is it just a dog you acquired from him, but he doesn't use the blood? Now I do, if I do sell a dog or farm out a dog and it works out, then I'll take a puppy off that and breed it back to my program. So you will see that in my pedigrees that I've done that, but that's typically a dog that went to a dog man that had the same standards as me and was working those dogs at a very high level. They were tested and selected, and then I felt the pup was valuable to my breeding program. I brought it back. So you'll see that in my dogs. But if it's a dog that I did not bring back to my program, but someone else is bringing it, it's probably not a dog that I want to use in my breeding program. Okay, it's just not something that meets my standard, or this is to say that I just don't know enough about the dog that I would take a risk on introducing those genes into my breeding program, even though they're part of the same family. And this is really where breeding gets into play. It's, you're now dealing with a genetic strain, a very small strain of dogs, maybe one of 100 dogs you bred. And it's that one line that you're moving forward with. That's the one out of the 100, and that's what you're focusing on, and that's what you're breeding off of. And that's what I have. That's the OG Loco Old Family Reds. Then the second test was, okay, I got them to a really high level. These dogs are game. You know, how do they compare to other dogs in other yards? And that was the second question of the evolutionary process. So I farmed some out to some dogmen, and those dogs excelled in their yards. They were great working dogs, game dogs. They proved themselves in other yards all over the country, to where people, those yards are using the OG Local blood for their breeding programs now. So that was a big testament of me bringing the OG Local dogs up to a very high working standard again, representative of the old Hempfield Lightner dogs, and then getting these dogs into working yards that are working with other lines of dogs like Eli, Red Boy, and Bolio, that are working with fast lane dogs, and seeing how my dogs compare to those dogs in hog hunting environments, and they excelled and they held their own. And that was a test of, okay, so I am doing something right, and I got these dogs and they're holding their own in other yards. And that was the big test. Do they hold their own in other yards? And are they producing in other yards? And they are. So having said that, then we were able to say, okay, these dogs are unique. Okay, there are other Old Family Red-Nosed dogs out there that have similar breeding, like the Hempfield, Geronimo, Red Dixie. They all go back to the same dogs. But they are not line bred off of the OG Loco dogs that I use, off of 44 Magnum, off OG Bull, off of Kratos, Ruger, and Jew, which is a direct, if you look at the pedigree, you can see a direct line in the pedigree back to those dogs. You're not going to see 100 different Old Family Red-Nosed dogs of different breeders, different names, that go back to different dogs that all trace back to Hempfield, Geronimo, and Red Dixie, because those aren't family bred dogs. Those were just somebody took different families of Old Family Red-Nosed dogs and bred them together, but they're not family bred. And then my big question is, they're not family bred, then how do you know they were working? How do you know, were they tested? What was the why? That's where the why comes in. Why did you do that breeding? You know, what was it about those dogs of why you selected them and why you moved forward? Well, if you're not family breeding your own dogs, you can't answer that question. You can't say, well, this is why I picked that dog and didn't pick that one. That's why I made that cross that produced this dog. And then that's how I took that dog back to this dog and produced that dog. If you can't explain that in your pedigree and your genetics, and that there's no thought, then the big question is, then why'd you breed those dogs? I'm not seeing it. Or what are you trying to breed for? I mean, what is your program? Are you breeding pets? Maybe. Okay. You could just be honest, as I breed pets, pet family dogs. That's all I do. Okay. That, at least that makes sense. It doesn't matter the working traits of the dogs. You're just breeding family pets. And as long as they're good family pets, they're good family pets. Or you could say, no, I'm breeding to a UKC or ADBA confirmation standard. So my breeding program is going to be a bunch of show dogs that are accomplished. They're going to be show champions, weight pulling champions, things like that, that competed in sanctioned show events, breed show events, and that's what you breed for because that was your standard. Or you can say, no, the dogs I picked were working dogs. I hunted them. They were working dogs. I tested them. They had to work. They had to have the working traits, and that's why those dogs were selected and picked. So you can see that in pedigrees and in families. Is the question to the breeder is why, and what was your thinking on when you did those crosses, and what were you trying to move forward with? And that's going to separate. That's going to separate the families, even though they may all go back to Geronimo and Red Dixie. They separated somewhere on the evolutionary genetic process that I bred more in the direction of pet, I bred more in the direction of show, or I bred more in the direction of working. Depending on what you're looking for, that's the type of questions you ask your breeder. Okay, if you want a working dog, then you go to someone that breeds working dogs and hunts them and tests them and culls them, and they're showing that these dogs are working in several yards at a very high level, and there's thought in the process and in the gene pool and the pedigree that you could talk to that breeder and they can tell you why they selected those dogs from a working standpoint and why those crosses were made. And that gives you an idea of the purity of the program. So let me pull up Scarface. I don't know if I can have him up here long because he's a big dog. I'll put him back, but then I want to wrap up this live with my crosses because it looked like it's going to rain. So I want to get this done. Okay. Oh, man. Strong dog, too. Come here. Don't knock your phone over. Okay, everybody. This is OG Scarface. Say hi, Scarface. OG Scarface is a pure OG Loco Old Family Red, stamped to my standard. See? Dark red toenails. He has all the traditional phenotype of the old Hemphill Wilder dog. I mean Hemphill Lightner dogs. And this dog is game. I mean, this is a game dog. He's a bulldog. He's very loving too. But Scarface is my future. He's about 2.5. We're gonna start breeding him this year, but he is the blend I was talking about. He's the blend of OG Kratos, OG Ruger, OG Jew that I created the pure OG Loco Old Family Reds off of. And he's a tested working bulldog. He's a serious bulldog. He's still young. And the next test is how he produces. We're hoping he produces a lot like him. And he's off of really good bitch. OG Locos Cajun Belle, who's a good bitch in her own right. She's a bulldog in her own right. And off Kratos, who is a bulldog in his own right. So his mom, Cajun Belle, I believe, is a granddaughter or great granddaughter of Kratos. And then I bred her back to Kratos to produce Scarface and Crazy Horse. Uh, I farmed out Crazy Horse to a friend in Southern California. He's going to do his own breeding with Crazy Horse, and I kept Scarface on my yard for my breeding program to move forward with. And hopefully, as we work together in different yards, we can cross Crazy Horse pups on Scarface and vice versa. That's the thinking, you know. But that's where family relationships of when you're working within a family of dogs, uh, you want to be able to keep the blood all in the family and keep it tight and move it forward. So Scarface, he's uh, he's a type of dog. I mean, I was really glad because Kratos, I milked him till the end. Kratos was when he was alive, he was a great dog. Um, so you know, you go through a lot of pups, and you're like, okay, you got to start thinking, who am I gonna replace Kratos with? Because he was getting up there in age, and he died. Was it last year of old age? So I was fortunate enough I had Scarface. I had Scarface and Crazy Horse to pick from when Kratos died. So uh, as a result, then I kept Scarface to move forward with. So the pure OG Loco Old Family Reds, um, off Scarface, I have Corvino, who was 3/4 Old Family Red, 1/4 Chinaman, also by Kratos. Um, that those dogs are my future males. Um, and I think I'm gonna have to pick another male to replace Wedo in the near future because he's getting up in age. So I want to keep 3 males on my yard that are all related. I want to keep the pure Old Family Red on Scarface. I want to keep the Old Family Red Chinaman blood on my yard off Corvino. And then I want to keep the Mayday Old Family Red blood on my yard. Right now it's Weddle, but maybe a son of his in the near future to replace Weddle in a couple of years. So ideally those will be the 3 bloods that I'm working with. And now I'm adding the Red Boy stuff um, for the Haymaker, and then I have the Weird Jack stuff that I'll be adding next year. So those will be all bloodlines that we're working with. But if you could see Scarface, he's heavy boned, nicely muscled. You know, he has the looks of the old Lightner, the old Hempfield dogs, and he's just solid, man. I mean, I think that's one thing I see in my OG Loco Old Family Reds that I think are different than other Old Family Red families is they have heavy bone, they're solid, they're indestructible. Like these dogs, you know, a lot of the dogs today I see are very fine bone, very refined, and as a working dog, you know, they're going to get hammered by a hog or even a raccoon or nutria. They get banged up pretty bad, especially if you're hunting like 300-pound hogs. Your dog has to be able to take the punishment. It doesn't matter how game you are. You could have a heart of deep gameness, dead gameness, and you're probably going to die because if your body can't take the punishment because your bones are too fine or your skin's too thin, your body's armor is not built for battle. I guess that's what I'm saying. It is, you could have all the heart in the world and you just won't be able to take it. Your bones are going to get snapped, you're going to get torn wide open. And so that's what I see in the OG Loco Old Family Reds. They still have the heavy bone, they still have the thick hide, they're still game, they bite hard, they're rugged, and they can take what they dish out. So, you know, in my breeding program, that's what I wanted. I wanted rugged, working dogs, dogs that can take whatever they dish out, and their body can withstand the punishment. And if you don't have that, then to me as a hunting dog, it didn't make sense because uh, it just can't take what it dishes out. And then heart comes into play is uh, can they take the punishment, uh, or will they quit because they can't take the punishment? And that's where gameness comes into play. Gameness doesn't come into play until you're taking punishment, adversity. Okay? You can be game all you want, you know, but the real test in the gameness comes when your dog takes punishment when it's out hunting, where it's getting its ass whooped. And it's just, you know, is your dog going to quit? Or is he going to take the punishment, not quit, and continue the battle and think it's going to win and control the hog? So that's really what we wanted to see, is we wanted to breed those types of dogs that no matter what, they weren't going to quit. And I think the real test was when I put them on a wild hog. When you finally get them out to people who are out hunting hogs, and these dogs go in. They go in and they take it and they give it and they dish it out and they don't quit, and they have the bodies to take the punishment, because that was really the test on the working dogs. Was I was doing it right because I needed dogs built for battle, and the OG Loco dogs are built for battle. They're just strong, powerful pit bulls. And what we're doing with the blood is now, okay, like, let me just define it this way. Why OG Loco Old Family Reds are the best working line of Old Family Reds in the world today. Okay. And it has to do with how I pick crosses. So when I do an outcross, I don't just outcross to any family of dogs or any line of dogs. I research and I find the best working line to cross into my dogs. So, for example, when I was looking to add the Chinaman blood, one is, why did I pick Chinaman? Okay. Well, Chinaman was a very well respected, world known, fast lane working dog, winning all over the world. Those dogs hunt and win all over the world. Known for deep gameness, hard mouth. That line of dogs for generations had been performing at a very high working level. So I didn't just pick any pit bull line, I picked the Chinaman line. But it wasn't just any Chinaman line I picked. I went, who was producing the best Chinaman dogs in the world? And which of those breeders had a high working standard, and which of those Chinaman dogs were they using that were winning in hog hunting? So that nailed it down. Well, Tom Garner. That was obvious. If you want some of the best Chinaman blood in the world, you go to Tom Garner. He produces some of the best. And then when I looked at his Chinaman dogs, I had to nail it down even further, is which one of his Chinaman dogs did I feel had the traits that I was looking for that would cross into my Old Family Reds. So it was not just finding the working line and finding the breeder, but then finding which one of his dogs had those traits. So I picked the chemo dog, orange chemo dog. And I was able to acquire one of the inbred chemo dogs, and that was OG Knox, and breed them in my line and blended it in. And it only made my dogs better because my selection process, before I introduced new blood into my line, had to come from a very high caliber, very well respected working line, so my dogs would get better, not get worse. Okay. Then the second step, okay, I did that with Chinaman, now Mayday. Okay, the Mayday dogs again, same process I went through. Which were the top working lines in the world? Mayday, Chinaman were up there, top two in my opinion at the time. Then who had the best working Mayday blood? And the best that I could find in my area was Melkamp Michael Myers, and I, you know, the Melkamp dogs, um, I feel, were or are, depending on where they're at in the breeding program, um, best bred modern day Mayday dogs. So my thinking was go to the best Chinaman breeder and then go to the best Mayday breeder. And Melkamp was the ones I felt were one of the best Mayday breeders out there. So Michael Myers, I blended that blood into my dogs. So now I have the Michael Myers blood, and it only made my dogs better. All working blood, all high caliber working hog hunting blood. It just made my dogs better. Then I recently did that with the Red Boy blood. So again, I looked at another strain of family dogs that's working at a very high level, highly respected, working blood all over the world. And Red Boy for years was one of those lines up there with Chinaman and Mayday. And then who was producing the best working line of Red Boy blood? And there was two I came down to. One was the Holland stuff, and then the Pitt Island stuff. So I haven't tried the Pitt Island, but I was able to breed to an inbred haymaker heavy on the Holland blood. Very well respected Red Boy line, very game, and it only made my dogs better. So the next step is now I have the Earl Jr. Chinaman blood, okay, which is another line of Chinaman through the Epinet, Earl Jr. blood. Highly respected working line. Again, I did my research and I found the Epinet Snow blood, which I liked. It has no Frisco in it, so the Chinaman, the chemo stuff had the Frisco, the Earl Jr. stuff didn't have the Frisco. So I have two separate lines of Chinamen, both highly respected working lines that I have bred into my dogs that only made my dogs better because they're all working, well-respected lines and the best blood I felt that was out there in the pit bull world today. And then recently I was able to acquire a heavily line-bred Weird Jack dog. I felt the Weird Jack dogs are probably one of the best grand champion blackjack dogs out there, heavily on the Jeep Red Boy Rascal blood. And that I'm going to do that breeding probably to this guy and to Corvino, and now start that family. And Serenity's a beast. So she's only gonna make my dogs better. So by blending Serenity's Weird Jack genes into my Old Family Red genes, it's only gonna make my dogs better. So now that goes into, okay, if I consider the Garner dogs and the Epinet dogs some of the best Chinaman blood in the world, working blood in the world, I consider the Pitt Island and the Holland blood some of the best working Red Boy blood in the world. I consider the Melkamp blood some of the best Mayday blood in the world, and the Southern Kennels blood some of the best Mayday blood in the world. And I consider the Weird Jack blood some of the best, the Woodall Weird Jack blood some of the best Jeep Red Boy Rascal blood in the world that I've blended into my blood. I say the same thing about the OG Loco blood. If you are looking for some of the best working Old Family Red blood in the world, then it's OG Loco blood. You know, I put it up there like if you want to find the best of that family that's out there working today, then OG Loco blood would be up at the top of that list for Old Family Red blood. And what we're finding is by crossing it into these other families, working family of dogs, we're getting better dogs. So the only reason it's working is it's clicking because you're breeding good dogs to produce better dogs, and that's what we've been showing. So I hope that help explains when I say the OG Loco Old Family Reds, and I qualify it, they gotta be OG Loco Old Family Reds, not only Old Family Reds, not Old Family Red Nose. If I had found, or let's just say this way, here's my concern. I have spent years of finding the best working Old Family Red Nose blood, testing, culling, and working it to a high level to develop dogs like Scarface. Okay. To go to another Old Family Red Nose family, let's just say, and introduce that blood into my dogs would be a step back. It wouldn't make them better. Especially if I don't know if those dogs have been tested and worked for generations. I'm better off breeding to pure Red Boy, pure Mayday, pure Chinaman to make my dogs better than to breed to another family of pure Old Family Red Nose dogs that have not been worked, have been checked, that have not been held to a very high standard for generations, because it does me no good. It'll set me back. And that's the danger when you're breeding dogs, and when you don't know the program of the breeder and what they were breeding for. You can say, I went and got a dog from this breeder, but if that stuff's not proven working stock and that's not their standard, it's only going to set you back. It doesn't make your dogs better. So at this point, there's probably only one, I don't know, people offer, why don't you cross it with this Old Family Red Nose? I don't know. I don't know if I'd get better dogs, because I don't feel those dogs are at the caliber of the OG Loco dogs. I just think it would set me back. It wouldn't make my dogs better. And what I want to do is keep my dogs working at a very high level and keep them better. And hopefully in a generation or two, I got better Old Family Reds than Scarface here, but he's one of the best I have today. But I don't want to just say he's the best I ever produced. I want to say the sons and grandsons of Scarface were way better than Scarface was, and he's a good dog in his own right. So anyway, let me put him down. It's starting to rain. Stay here. Stay here. That's the OG Loco family. I hope that answers a lot of questions. I don't know if I can have time. It's starting to rain here. Let's see if I have time to answer some of these questions. Nice to meet you. Let's see. Loki's a good game dog. I like Loki. I think with the Old Family Reds, if you want hard mouth, you got to cross them into a line of dogs that are very hard mouth. I got hard mouth Old Family Reds, but I could say like my Chinaman and my and Serenity, who's the Jeep Red Boy, they have mouths that are slightly harder than my Old Family Reds. So if you're looking for really, you want to add heavy mouth, and that's your goal, then I would cross them out to a line of dogs that has real heavy mouth if you want to add heavy mouth. And it should work, because if you're starting off with a line of dogs that has really good mouth on it, and then you're just adding more mouth to it, like a Chinaman, Eli dog, or even an alligator dog, those dogs were bred for heavy mouth, then you're really just gonna enhance those traits. So you can't go wrong with it. Let me see. The blue Pauls. The blue Pauls are extinct. So the blue Pauls were a blue fighting dog from Scotland. They were like the Old Family Reds and the English Staffordshire Terriers that were imported to America. And the blue Pauls were basically a diluted black dog, which produces blue. They were known as blue Pauls, and they were a very game fighting dog from Scotland back in the early 1900s, late 1800s. But they went extinct in their pure form. So they were absorbed into the American Pit Bull Terrier breed. And I think, what was the dog? One of the dogs, I think I traced it once, had the game working blue Paul blood. I think it was Going Like Barney. If you trace Going Like Barney all the way back, one of the blue dogs that God, I can't remember, the one that went into Cersei Jeff. There was a match with Cersei Jeff, and that dog was, he lost to Cersei Jeff in like 1920, 1930. And he was considered a blue dog that probably had blue Paul breeding in him. But the blue paw breeding got absorbed, and that blood in its pure form is no longer around. Um, the blue that's in the Amstaffs today, I do not believe that is blue paw blood. I believe that came from something else that was introduced into the Amstaff breeding. Typically, the way you get a blue dog is it's a dilute gene. So the mom and dad have to carry the dilute gene. And that dilute gene on a black base colored dog, so if you have black base colored dogs or black dogs, and they throw the dilute genes, they dilute that black dog to gray, which is blue, what we call blue. Now we do know some of the breeders, game breeders, that had black dogs, bred that gene out of their dogs because they didn't like it or they didn't feel it was a game line. So you don't see the blue color in game bred working American Pit Bull Terriers. It has popped up, and there has been some good game match dogs that came off of a few, but the percentages are really low. It's not a lot of them. Very low percentages of blue game working pit bulls. But most of the blue stuff you see today, if you have blue in your pit bull, it probably has a staff in it because that's where they're getting the blue color from. Let's see. What else we got here? Do you get a lot of shy dogs? Well, I don't know. I mean, none of my dogs are shy. So it really depends. I mean, every dog's an individual. I think every dog's an individual. You have to call. You know, there's no guarantee on, I guess this is what I have to say to the owner of the breeder. If a dog does not meet your standards, regardless of how it's bred or who you got it from, call it. There's no reason to breed it. Okay, if shyness is one of the traits that you do not like, and that's not a trait I like. So I don't have shy dogs that I breed off of. Do they produce shy dogs? Probably, but it's not something I would keep in my breeding program because it's not a trait I want to further in my breeding program. So if you have a shy dog and a shy dog is not the trait that you like, call that dog. Don't breed off it. Spay it, give it away, get rid of it. Find a dog either off the same bloodline that's not shy or a different bloodline. But this is what I try to tell people. We as breeders have to make that selection, regardless of who you get the dog from, regardless of the pedigree, because each dog is an individual. I could have litter mates to my dogs that are trash and not even in the same league as a litter mate that I kept, but I didn't breed off of it. It was culled because it had traits that I did not want to further in my breeding program. I took the best and then line bred off those. So I encourage everybody, don't blame the dog, don't blame the breeder, because every breeder is going to produce good and bad dogs. As you move forward, if a dog does not meet your standard, don't breed it. I mean, it's that simple. Don't breed the dog. Just get rid of it or keep it as a pet. And a cull doesn't mean put it down. It just means I'm not breeding off that dog. I'm not going to further that dog's genes. So if I look at the OG Loco Old Family Reds, a coalition of lions, 3 brothers. That's what I created. Okay, the 3 brothers in the wild, you know, the wild picks the biggest and strongest that pass on their genes by taking over prides and conquering it. So the Mapagos, if you're familiar with the Mapago Lion Coalition, they're probably one of the greatest lion coalitions that has ever lived. They just wiped out everybody, and their genes are now in like 90% of the lion prides out there because they conquered everyone. And they were a coalition of brothers that when they reached maturity, they just went and took over territory. And their genes are now all blended together in these lion prides out in Africa that exist today. So anyway, I would encourage you to go to YouTube and watch the story of the Mapago Lions and their rise to power and how they took over numerous prides, and their genes still live today. Well, I sort of did that with the OG Loco dogs. That was the thinking. Take a coalition of three brothers, start blending their genes together to produce better dogs. Yeah, I pick the best, I cull the rest. So I would encourage breeders to do the same thing. If a dog does not meet your standard, don't breed it. There's no reason to breed it. So I think we all have to own that. I own that too. Is if a dog, no matter who I get it from, is if that dog doesn't meet my standard, I don't breed it. But if that dog meets my standard, I'm guaranteeing you I'm breeding that dog because I have access to a lot of dogs. It's not just one dog for me. It's like I got access to a bunch of dogs to pick from, and I'm working with different yards. So just because one litter didn't work out or one dog from a litter didn't work out, doesn't mean that whole litter didn't work out. It just means the one I got didn't work out, and that means that I'm not going to breed off that one. But that's not to say that if the blood's good and the family's working and the siblings are working, I wouldn't try it again. It just means the one I got didn't meet my standard. So I think every breeder has to own that. You have to make that decision for your program. And if you don't hold yourself to that standard, then you're going to produce a line of shy dogs. That's what you're going to get. And there's no one to blame but yourself because you had that choice to breed that dog and further its genes. We as breeders want to try to stick to the wild as much as possible. The strongest and the fittest survive, and those are the ones that we further the genes with in the dog population. Don't breed weak specimens, regardless of pedigree or genetics. If they're a weak representative, don't breed it. Pick a strong representative that has all the traits you're looking for and move forward with that dog. So that's what I would say. Let's see. Do they normally get over it at 2 years of age? I don't know. I mean, a shy dog's a shy dog. I don't see it growing balls or coming out of shyness. But I have seen this, and this is, I guess I don't understand what shyness is. I have human submissive dogs that will roll over on their back on a human, and they're human submissive. That's a very strong trait on them, that are dead game on an animal. And I've seen that. So if you're looking for a protection dog, and the dog's shyness doesn't meet your needs for protection, I probably wouldn't use it. I'd find a dog that wasn't human submissive, wasn't shy with humans. But if that dog's working on what you're using it for, if you're out hunting and it's game and it'll scratch to its death, that's a choice you have to make. Does the dog do what I'm using it for? Does it perform at that level? It may not be a great guard dog because it's human submissive, maybe human shy, but you turn it loose and that thing hits everything it can. And I've seen that a lot. I've seen dogs that are overly human submissive are overly game on animals, and I don't know why. It could be the way the old dogs were bred, because they didn't like man biters and they were cold, because you don't want a man biter in the pit. So they bred human submissive dogs, but as long as they were deep game for the pit, they didn't care, because they want to be able to get in there and handle them, and you want to doctor them. I mean, I've doctored some dogs that were pretty torn up from hog hunting and hunting, like you got to sew them up and stuff, and they let me without growling or biting me. They just let me, and that takes a lot of trust. You get in there and you clean them up and you give them their shots and you sew them up and you staple them up, and the dog lets you and it doesn't bite or growl or nip at you. So I think that's the way those dogs were bred, and it's a trait I see. But they were game dogs as long as they're game and they're working. So I think you have to decide. You want to breed a protection dog? I don't know if my dogs are good at protection. because a lot of them are human friendly, human submissive. Not all of them, but a lot of them like people. So it's really hard to, unless you train it, like professionally train it to hit a sleeve and they think it's a game, you know, they don't feel they're attacking a human. But I mean, every dog's an individual. You'll have to decide if that's the type of dog you want to move forward with. So anyway, I have to get out of here. This was a good live. Hope this answers a lot of questions. And then I'll try to do something new next week. I'll probably start bringing in some of the other dogs. I'm going to feature one of my dogs in every live. So thanks for sticking with me. Take care. Stay out of trouble. And see you next week.